absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, hello there. It's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co, the show where we'll get into the things that have got you talking today. And now, of course, we've had a by-election, haven't we, in Chester, the first one of Rishi Sunak's premiership. Got to say it, the Tories got absolutely battered. Is this the start of the end of the Tory party? What do you think to that, yes or no? Now, strikes. They're going everywhere now, aren't they? Pretty much everyone, every sector, everything seems to be going on strike. We talk about it often. It does feel now, though, that there is an element of coordination to some of this now, whether it's the health service, whether it's the rail and the roads, we found out today, coordinating their efforts. It's got to the point for me personally where I feel that this is almost now the unions attempting to hold the country hostage. Am I wrong? Or is this indeed the next step that the unions should be taking in order to get the members the pay that they feel that they deserve? And over in the US, Biden is saying that he would meet Putin to talk peace in Ukraine. But hang on a second, shouldn't have this happened months and months and months ago? Why have so many countries been so reluctant to try and bring a peaceful end to the conflict in Ukraine? And what should the UK's role be in all of this? And Matt Hancock is finally back in Parliament. What do you reckon the future holds for him, though? Do you even think he should be there? Some people are saying he's got no business being in Parliament. Has he? You tell me. We'll have all of that to come. But first, let's get ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines.
Good evening, I'm Alice Porter in the GB Newsroom. The UK Health Security Agency has confirmed 6 young children have now died from a strep A infection. Deaths include children from Ealing, Surrey and Cardiff. Health officials say they've seen a slight rise in cases of strep A, which can cause scarlet fever, though deaths and serious complications from the infection are rare. GB News understands health officials are dealing with new cases of diphtheria at the Manston Migrant Processing Centre in Kent. The cases were discovered among the more than 2,000 Channel migrants who've arrived on small boats in recent days. GB News has obtained exclusive images from inside Manston, revealing some of the poor conditions migrants are living in. Official sources have told us they believe those testing positive for diphtheria contacted it while living in Rough in France. Sajid Javid has announced he will not stand again at the next general election. The MP for Bromsgrove was the Health Secretary until July this year, when he stood in the Tory leadership campaign. He's one of the most prominent Conservative MPs to announce they're to step down. He also held other cabinet positions, including Chancellor and Home Secretary. In a letter to the chairman of the Bromsgrove Conservative Association, Mr Javid said serving the government had been the privilege of his life and that he hoped his best was sufficient. The Labour leader says the party's by-election win in Chester shows people want a change of government. Samantha Dixon increased the party's majority by more than 4,000 to almost 11,000. The contest was triggered by the resignation of former Labour MP Christian Matheson following complaints of serious sexual harassment. He denies the allegations. Sir Keir Starmer says voters are fed up with financial chaos.
The Labour Party has been putting forward a positive plan for the future, how we stabilise and grow our economy. So we were putting a positive choice to the electorate in Chester. The government is worn out, tired, has crashed the economy, and the verdict was very, very clearly given. And I think that's a clear message to the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, that people are fed up and they want a change.
Another arrest has been made in the investigation into the murders of two 16-year-olds who were stabbed to death just a mile apart in south-east London. An 18-year-old man is now in custody and two other teenage boys have been charged. The victims have been named as Kern Selenki, who was found in Thamesmead, and Charlie Bartolo, who was found in Abbey Wood last month. The Met Police say the suspects, aged 15 and 16, have been remanded in youth custody to appear at the Old Bailey on Tuesday. Chemotherapy and dialysis are among a list of services that will be protected from strikes in the build-up to Christmas. The Royal College of Nursing has also announced that critical care units, neonatal and paediatric intensive care will not be impacted. Other services will be severely reduced. Members of the RCN in England, Wales and Northern Ireland are set to take industrial action on December the 15th and 20th. The RMT union boss has held urgent talks with the government in a bid to halt strikes planned over the Christmas period. Mick Lynch met Scotland's Transport Minister yesterday. The pair have urged Westminster to intervene in the Network Rail pay dispute. Transport Secretary Mark Harper said he wanted to work with the RMT and the employers in good faith to resolve issues. Mr Lynch said talks will continue over the weekend. Royal Mail has been told it cannot keep blaming the COVID pandemic for late deliveries. It's after the firm had failed to meet several of its annual delivery targets last year. Regulator Ofcom say just 82% of first-class mail was delivered within 1 working day. That's below a target of 93%. Ofcom said performance at Royal Mail also fell well short of where it should be in the early parts of this financial year. Conspiracy theorist Alex Jones has filed for bankruptcy. It comes less than 2 months after a jury ordered him to pay more than £800 million for spreading lies about the 2012 Sandy Hook mass shooting. Chapter 11 paperwork submitted to the US bankruptcy court claims Jones has between £800,000 and £8 million in assets. TV, online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for that. Well, I'm with you right through till 7 o'clock this evening, and alongside me, keeping me company right through to the bitter end, is my panel, the political consultant Alex Dean and the proud trade unionist. I was going to say just trade unionist, but you told me you were very proud, so I thought I'd get that in there.
Trade unionists are proud, come on.
Yeah, well, got a few things to say to you, young man. Anyway, he's also the author and the fireman, very brave, I have to say, Paul Embry. And you know the drill, don't you? It's not just about us three on this show tonight. It's about you at home as well. I want all your thoughts tonight. What is on your mind? You can get in touch with me on email, gbviews@gbnews.uk as usual, or you can tweet me at gbnews. Don't forget, I want to talk strikes, I want to talk politics, I want to talk peace in Russia, Are we ever going to get there? In Ukraine, sorry. Are we ever going to get there? And Matt Hancock is back in Parliament. Do you care? Did he win you over when he was in the jungle? Or do you think he needs to be out? I want your thoughts on all of that. But first up, let's get straight into politics, shall we? Labour's lead, I mean, well, I'm just going to cut straight to the chase because ultimately this was indeed the first by-election since Rishi Sunak took his premiership up. And I have to say, the Tories got an absolute battering. And it doesn't really feel like that is going anywhere. That we've just ran a people's poll here at GB News that found that Labour are sitting on 46% of the vote. This was how they would vote if there was a general election tomorrow, of course. The Tories languishing at just 21%. The Lib Dems even further behind at 7%. Goodness me. Well, let's speak to Conservative MP Greg Smith live now. Good evening. Greg, I've just been mentioning there the Chester by-election. Let's just cut straight to the chase. You guys got an absolute kicking. Are the Tories basically a busted flush now?
Look, by-elections are things that sitting governments rarely win. In fact, the abnormal cycle of by-elections was actually when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister and we were winning places like Hartlepool whilst in government. That historically hasn't normally happened. And by-elections are a way that the public give the government a bit of a kicking. I'm not going to pretend that the result was in any way good. It was deeply uncomfortable to see it this morning. But I don't think it's something that we should take as out of the ordinary or something that is showing a particular direction of travel for the next general election. Yeah, we're behind in the polls. We've got a lot of work to do to re-earn trust, to show that the Conservatives are still the party that are best placed to run the country and the economy. But if you look back to the 1990s, Tony Blair was getting much bigger swings to the Labour Party ahead of the 97 general election in that 92 to 97
Greg,
Parliament.
respectfully, I don't really care about the 90s, to be honest. You're saying, and of course, you're telling me what you should be telling me, that you are strong, you're fit to govern, and you are the party of the people. I mean, but come on, even today, Sajid Javid, he said he's not even going to run again at the next election. Many of your team are saying exactly the same because they know, you must know, that you're not really going to win the next general election, are you?
Well, the next general election is 2 years away. A lot can change in politics in a week, let alone 2 years. I fully acknowledge our place in the polls right now is not good. We've got a lot of work to do to re-earn trust, to show that we do have a good, strong, credible plan for the country and the economy. But just to take on this point about colleagues saying they're stepping down at the moment, it's catching your attention and the wider media attention at the moment. Lots of colleagues saying they're standing down. And the reason for that is that it's happening abnormally early. Not because people are randomly choosing to stand down, but because of the massive boundary changes that are happening across the whole country to equalise the number of electors in each constituency. Certainly my party is asking all of us if we want to stand again and which seats we want to stand in far earlier than in the normal electoral cycle. So before every general election, 10, 20, 30, 40 MPs from any particular party will retire or decide they want to do something else or go back to their old career or whatever it might be. The difference this time round is people are having to say what they're going to do, probably a year and a half earlier than they ordinarily would because of the boundary change.
Yeah, the boundary changes sound like a convenient excuse to me, but let's move on, shall we? Let's talk strikes. We're now seeing coordination, aren't we, across unions, across different sectors. So now we're going to have, it's been confirmed today, coordinated strikes in your area, rail and road. Let's just be honest. Do you think the government have lost control of the situation now?
Well, the current government, the Transport Ministers, Hugh Merriman today and Mark Harper as the Secretary of State for Transport have been trying to actually step in where the government shouldn't be stepping in to try and resolve particularly the rail dispute. Let's not forget that the negotiations on pay and conditions and working practices are between the unions and the train operating companies, with Network Rail in the mix as well. The government is not a player in those negotiations.
So why are you meeting them then? Why are you talking to the unions then?
Well, to your point, because things have got so bad, because there seems to be a total impasse, because no deal can be reached, either, you can look at it from both sides, either because the demands of the unions are frankly unreasonably high, or because the train operating companies are just not budging 1 inch. There is blame on both sides of the fence here. The government has had to take a view that they needed to get both parties round the table to try and hammer something out. I don't know how that went today. Mick Lynch, as he came out of the Hugh Merriman meeting, seems to have indicated that talks are ongoing and they'll be back around those tables. But fundamentally, these strikes are going to hammer the British economy yet again at a time when traders and the hospitality industry desperately need the income. They're still struggling post-pandemic. They're still struggling to ensure that their books are healthy and balanced. And December is a month when they are reliant on that trade. And, if I can just put a gentle point to the unions via the listeners of your show, this is not the time to be trying to endear yourself to the British public by shutting down their ability to go to Christmas parties, to do their Christmas shopping, to get to work, to get to medical appointments, and for children to be getting to school. Lots of kids use the railways to get to school in my patch.
They do indeed, and as it would happen, as luck would have it, I've got a proud trade unionist sat right beside me, so a bit later on in my programme I shall put that exact point to him. But for now, Conservative MP Greg Smith, thank you for your time. Alex Dean, I'm going to pick up with you on the political side of things. We'll touch on strikes in a few minutes, but for now, politics. Do you reckon the Tories are done?
No, I don't. I like Greg Smith very much, so it pains me to disagree with him a bit. I think he's right about the point about people choosing not to stand again. The Tory party's formally asked all MPs to decide by the 5th if they're going to stand because of the boundary changes, and that's forced people's minds in a way that it wouldn't have done otherwise, that deadline. He's also right, of course, that governments usually lose by-elections. And for what it's worth, it's to state the obvious that Keir Starmer isn't Tony Blair, and therefore you can, the Tory party comforts itself with saying that he won't win as big as Blair did. But where we part ways a bit, I'm afraid, is on the lessons to learn from the Chester by-election. And the reason that, whilst by-elections can often be a time to kick the government, the reason I think it's worth looking at is that if you think about the recent by-elections we've had, so Neil Parish, sex scandal, Imran Khan, sex scandal, disregard the sad by-elections caused by the death of Jack Dramey and the murder of David Amos, and go back to the last one caused by an MP having to go, Owen Paterson scandal. The Tories in those, whether safe or marginal, took a kicking in all three, but comforted ourselves by saying it's because of what happened with the incumbents. The incumbents their names were stained, they dragged down the ticket, that was the problem.
And this time it was Labour?
This time it was the Labour incumbent who had his name stained by, in the words of the investigators, a serious sexual scandal. And it seemed to hurt Labour not one bit. The Conservative Party was punished at the polls in Chester. So it does rather suggest to me that the Conservative Party is in some trouble. Not done, but in some trouble.
Yeah, and I always find it fascinating, the turnout at these by-elections, because almost 60% of people, by the way, didn't even bother to go out and vote. So if I was an MP, I'd be having a good look in the mirror, having a word with myself, asking myself, why do so few people even care? That's what I'd want to ask myself anyway. Where do you stand on it, Paul?
Well, I just think one of the talking points of politics at the moment is the way that the Tories have squandered that significant political realignment that took place in our country at the 2019 election when they romped to victory, 80 seats or whatever it was, made significant inroads into red wall territory where previously they didn't pick up many seats at all. And they did it, frankly, on the promise, first of all, of getting Brexit done. They won a lot of working class voters on that promise. But also, I think they got the messaging right around some of the stuff about levelling up. We're not going to be a government like previous Tory governments, rolling back the frontiers of the state, handing over everything to the market, every man for himself kind of thing. It was very much more of a kind of interventionist approach. We will level up your community. We will bring jobs and industry and regeneration to your community. And people actually quite like that. And to see them now, just 2-3 years, whatever it is, down the line, scraping along the bottom of the opinion polls, I mean, something has gone very, very seriously wrong for the Tories. I kind of liken it to a lottery winner who wins millions and then just fritters it away and is now bankrupt. And that's almost what they've done with that political legacy. Now, That doesn't mean that people have suddenly fallen in love with Labour. I don't think Labour particularly is inspiring people at the moment. I think what people are doing is thinking they're probably the best of a bad bunch. Almost similar to the situation we had in Australia recently with the general election, where the Labour Party won it, but not particularly because they inspired people, but they thought they were the least worst option.
Well,
but
to that point,
I mean, there's still 2 years to go. The MP was right. There's still 2 years to go, and it's far from over.
But to that point, and something I find interesting is I can see it in my inbox already. People are saying they won't vote Tory at the next one, they won't vote Labour at the next one. They want to vote the Reform Party. So that's what I've got in my inbox already. We have all of these different polls that come out saying that the Reform Party is making these strides in the polls, whatever. Reform Party actually ran in the by-election. They got 773 votes. What do you think to that?
With due respect to your audience, and I love this channel, it's a reflection of the people who choose to watch GB News. That Reform is significantly higher in the inbox messages that you get, than it is in votes. It's a particular perspective on politics today, and a rejection of the mainstream. Indeed, rejection of the mainstream is part of why this channel came into existence. So, there is that. But I think, too, that people say, I'm not going to vote X, Y or Z, and then do. People lie to pollsters all the time. That's one of the reasons I disregard opinion polls and take actual elections more seriously. That's why I focus more on the result of even a by-election. I take as a much more serious barometer. Even with 60% of voters not turning out, I take it as a more serious barometer than opinion polls. But your numbers were based on the prospect of there being a general election tomorrow. And it is no state secret to say there ain't going to be a general election tomorrow, because it would be very bad for the Conservative Party, I think. And the reason, answer to your question about how's the Tory party doing, the reason that I still have hope for my party is get the economy back on track is the plain agenda of the Sunak government. And, if you look at where the pound is, you look at where gilts are, and you look at where employment is, some of the fundamentals are not actually bad in this country. And inflation, we sit mid-pack in Europe. It's not like everything's terrible. Get the economy back on track. Deliver some tax cuts, which has to be at the heart of a Conservative government, and then hope for the best with the electorate. I mean, after all, I understand the need now, having spent all that we spent during COVID, for higher government spending. But you can't go to the electorate on that basis. You can't go to the electorate on a centre-left level of state spending as a Tory party. It doesn't work.
Neil Kinnock always said that general elections are won in years, they're not won in weeks and months. And that if I had a direct line to Keir Starmer, that's exactly the advice I would be given. Look, yes, the Tories are in a really bad place at the moment, but hey, there's still 2 years to a general election, and it's far from clear, to my mind, that in 2 years' time we're going to be in exactly the same place. I mean, let's not forget that Michael Foot, who's now ranked as one of the most unpopular Labour leaders of all time, was miles in front of Margaret Thatcher in the opinion polls in something like 1982, and then got smashed the following year. So polls matter, but they're not the be-all and end-all. We shouldn't get too carried away with them.
Well, there you go. Are you someone that gets carried away with polls, or are you pinch of salt kind of person like what we've got here? And by the way, I always ask this about polls. Have you ever been polled in your life? Honestly, genuinely, I've never been polled for anything.
Neither have I.
Ever. I'm not, and I always... Have you?
No, I can't say I have, actually.
I've never been polled, for anything, whatever. I was just about to say anything sensible, but I don't even think I've been polled for anything that's not sensible either, quite frankly.
Is it all a big ruse, do you think?
I don't know.
These people don't really exist.
I don't think so. No, because we've just done our own people's poll, haven't we? That's the one that's the one I was reflecting there. But have you ever been polled? Get in touch. Tell me if you have. I'm intrigued. Also, are you in Chester, by the way? And are you someone that didn't vote? If you are, tell me why. I'm also intrigued by that. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, lots of you in my inbox already about this one. What am I talking about? Coordinated strikes. Goodness gracious me. Where do you stand on this? We're seeing coordination in the health service now. We're seeing coordination in the transport service now. Is this all going a little bit too far? Or is this the unions just doing exactly what they're supposed to do, which is get the best deal for their members? Tell me, do you support this or not? I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely
Right.
stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship,
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
and no reason to go to bed.
So I guess I've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio, and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock tonight. And alongside me, I've got the political consultant, Alex Dean, and the trade unionist and fireman, Paul Embry. Good evening, gents. You guys have been getting in touch. I have to say, most of you are saying that you do think it will be the end of the Tories at the next election. But as we've all just been saying, ultimately, things change, don't they? We've got the best part of 2 years there or thereabouts till we've got one. So let's see how we go, shall we? Mark, you've just said Starmer's Labour Party could be literally the only option on my ballot and I still wouldn't vote for them. Why? What have they done that's turned you off that much? What would you rather have there? Nothing over the Labour Party? Tell me your thoughts on that. Let's talk strike, shall we? We all know what's going on by now, don't we? Pretty much everyone everywhere seems to be going on strike. We've discussed it often. You know, let's not go back round the houses. What seems to be happening now, though, is an element of coordination that wasn't yet there before. You've got it in the health service, for example. On the 20th of December now, it's planned perhaps that you've got your ambulance staff, your nurses, etc., coming together. Road workers and rail workers, they're going to coordinate their strikes too. I'm going to start with you, Paul Embry, on this. And I'm going to lay my cards on the table. I think it's a disgrace. I think that unions are almost acting as a manipulative force. I think that they are trying to hold your average Joe to ransom. You're trying to hold the country hostage. And I think it's inappropriate. I worry that people's lives are going to be impacted, their health, certainly lifestyles will be impacted, but people's healths. What do you say to that?
Well, I can see you're in two minds on this one, Michelle.
I'm definitely not. I could have gone a bit harder, but I won't because I like you. But
I mean, what I would say is, look, these things don't come out of a clear blue sky, do they? Why is it that millions of workers across the country have suddenly stood up and said, actually, what's going on is not acceptable, we're going to fight back against
because
this?
They know they can.
It's not that's simplistic, with all due respect. It's because we're in a cost of living crisis and people are struggling to make ends meet and people are being told once again that they have to pay the price for an economic crisis they did not create. They were told the same thing in 2008, by the way, with the global financial crisis. They had to pay the price of that through austerity. They're now being told, as a result of the cost of living crisis, they've got to pay the price of that. They're being told they have to accept real terms pay cuts after 14 years of appalling pay increases, you know, very paltry pay increases. And the idea that workers have suddenly woken up one morning and said, actually, we're just going to create a bit of trouble today, that's not how it works. You know, people are struggling to pay their mortgages. People are worried about heating their homes. People are worried about buying Christmas presents for their children. And when, after the last 14 years of the previous economic crisis, they're approached again by their employers and by the government, who tell them, actually, you've got to tighten your belts even further. At some point, people say enough is enough. At some point, people say, look, I'm not prepared to accept this anymore. You're coming to me again saying I must accept a real terms pay cut. Why should I accept it? And at the same time, Michelle, I would also point out that they see that city bonuses are increasing quite handsomely. Executive pay is going up quite handsomely. Some of our big
What's that got to do with the price of fish? A private banker, what's he got to do with an heir? What's she got to do with an heir?
Because it goes to the heart of an economy that is fundamentally unfair. When executive pay is going up quite handsomely and city bonuses are going up quite handsomely.
But taxpayers don't pay. Taxpayers don't pay your private sector's CEOs.
I don't think you can say, well, because taxpayers pay the wages of public sector workers, therefore they should have kind of less of a right to strike, or they're somehow,
I wouldn't say that.
What they're doing is more morally unacceptable than any private sector worker. We've got some of our corporations which are recording record profits at the moment. We've got a government that thinks it's appropriate to lift the cap on bankers' bonuses. There's an economy that's fundamentally unfair, and people see it and they feel it, and they've decided to say at long last, this is not acceptable, we're going to fight back, and we shouldn't condemn them for it.
You suggested that Michelle's question was simplistic. It is simplistic to just say the economy is unfair because somebody gets X and I want X, or I don't get enough of that. The people in the private sector that you're criticising for receiving high pay are not only not in the NHS, which would be the right comparison. If your point was NHS senior executives are getting massive bonuses and frontline staff aren't, I would really think you had a strong point, but that wasn't your argument. Your argument was that bankers are getting paid more.
That was one example.
The thing about the people, let's take the private sector per se. It's people in the private sector who pay taxes that then go on to pay for our
those
public
bonuses
sector.
are indeed
and
taxed.
Those people receiving more money, I mean, as far as, and then we also attract people who invest here and innovate here by lifting the bankers' bonus cap. And as rightly pointed out by Michelle, the bankers' bonuses are taxed to a very high level, much more than your key workers that we're talking about.
The point about it shouldn't, Alex, be a race to the bottom. It shouldn't be counterposing what people in the public sector get and are asking for
Paul,
with what people in the private sector get and are asking for.
You've made that comparison.
No, I'm saying there are some people at the top of society who are doing very handsomely. There were some people who did very nicely out of the pandemic, and the people I named.
Those
and people at the
well.
other end of the scale see that, and they think, well, hold on a second, this is not fair. And why is it? This is a question I'd like answered. Why is it that when it comes to ordinary workers going on strike, trade unions going on strike, people are quick enough to say you're holding the country to ransom?
No, I'm talking about the coordination of these strikes. That's where I've got the problem.
So why is it that when a multinational company or some chief executive of some big corporation puts pressure on governments and says, look, unless you give us a low tax regime, a low regulation regime, as lots of multinational companies do nowadays, we're going to up sticks and move our operations abroad, and governments give way to them the whole time because they don't want to see capital flight and lose the investment. Why is that not holding the country to ransom? Why do we indulge the rich when they make demands on government, but we don't indulge people at the other end of the scale when they make
Because you want to have a go at wealthy people, you've twice ducked the point I was making, which is that people in the banking example that you chose and others, when they do well, it means a higher level of income for the state. And in the end, your politics of envy, which you encourage, is very reductive. And where you say, well, why do people think it's different? Or why can't we take a different position on workers and so forth? The point is, most people in this country, NHS workers and others included, see it. And you know what, Paul? You see it too.
Alex,
and you willfully avoid that answer because you don't... Either you don't have an answer or it's easier just to have a go at wealthy people.
It's not the case at all. What about your politics of envy when you look at trade unionists who are taking strike action, who have had to bear the brunt of economic crisis over the last 14 years, whose real wages have fallen, whose living standards have crashed, whose mortgages are going up, who are struggling to make ends meet, and you say, actually, you're not worth that, we're not going to pay you that. Is that not a form of politics of envy? Because you think that cleaners and rail workers and firefighters and nurses perhaps don't deserve that sort of
And at this point, Paul, you find, I think quite clearly, you can watch it back, you simply put words in my mouth. mouth. I didn't get a chance to speak about this strike yet. You've just had it out with Michelle.
I'm drawing attention to the double standards of saying that...
expressed on this strike
let him go.
is that
Alex,
they should
go on.
continue negotiating. After all, patient outcomes will be significantly affected by a strike of this scale and on this coordinated level. After all, if there was no effect on patients, you'd wonder why people employed in these jobs were doing them. There must inevitably and necessarily be a significant and detrimental effect to patients, and it seems to me the right thing to do is to carry on negotiating. After all, there was an offer on the table. It may not have been exactly what people wanted, but the right thing to do is carry on negotiating rather than walking away.
Yeah, but the reality is, Alex, and you know this, that one way of exerting pressure on an employer or on a government to increase an offer is to say, look, we're that angry about it, we're going to run a ballot for industrial action, and we will take industrial action if we get a yes vote, as many unions have now done.
I didn't say they shouldn't be allowed to. I said they shouldn't.
Right, but that sometimes, quite often, will force the employer or the government to come back to the table and say, of course we want to avert a strike, therefore we're going to increase the money on the table. I mean, considering what we've seen in terms of the economy over the last 14 years and austerity and sluggish growth and the impact on people's disposable income and living standards and stuff, it's quite remarkable we haven't had more strikes before now. It's quite remarkable that we've had to wait this long before actually something starts to break out.
Your arguments about the right to strike are, of course, correct. People are entitled to withdraw their labour. Nobody should be compelled by the state or others to work, but there are, of course, consequences, potentially, to withdrawing your labour, and certainly there are consequences to withdrawing your labour outside of a regulated strike, which is not what we're talking about here. But I'm not arguing people shouldn't be able to strike or even to coordinate a strike, or I find it unattractive when they do this thing over Christmas, try and make it as hard as possible.
I don't think it's
for people on
unattractive.
holidays.
I think it's appalling and shameful.
All right, well, I'll choose my words, you choose yours.
Yeah, I do. I think it's awful.
But I'm not arguing that they shouldn't be allowed to strike. I'm arguing that they shouldn't. And you will realise, I think, quite quickly that public sympathy can go one of two directions. You are assuming now that the public will universally, because of the respect we hold people doing these these kinds of jobs in, will be on their side. And broadly speaking, right now, it probably is, actually.
Oh, I don't know. Not in my inbox.
If you take your labour out of hospitals for this length of time over Christmas, see how opinions change.
Alex, let me tell you, I've been a firefighter for 25 years. I've been on strike before. I've stood on picket lines. I've withdrawn my labour. It's an agonising decision. People always wrestle with their consciences. I did. All of my colleagues did. I've no doubt that nurses will be doing at the moment. Other public sector workers will be doing at the moment. But there comes a point where you have to accept people have got a valid case. And if you say, OK, we accept that you've got a valid case, but you know what? We're not going to allow you that weapon of strike action because we think it's morally wrong. And effectively, you're saying to people, just take what's thrown at you, boys and girls. Take what's thrown at you.
I didn't say
because
that.
It would be wrong to fight back and take any sort of industrial action. But that's the logic of what you're saying.
Do you recognise that, I mean, because I have to go to break, so this is a very brief question that I've got. Do you recognise that there are a lot of perks, for example, in being in the public sector? So you keep referencing the comparison between the private sector and the public sector. If I just think, for example, just about your employer contributions towards pensions, for example, you're talking upwards of 20% often in the public sector. In the private sector, I can quote you a number of businesses where your employer contribution is a 3%.
I think, look, I mean, I certainly don't want to focus just on the public sector. I mean, there have been some strikes in the private sector recently, and I think there will be more. I think some of the pay and conditions in the private sector are appalling. But I go back to the point I made to Alex, Michelle, it shouldn't be a race to the bottom. It should be about saying, actually, we want decent pay and conditions for everybody. If that means levelling up elements of the private sector to the public sector, then so be it.
Well, there you go, everyone at home. You've heard a mixture of views. What's yours? Where do you stand on it all? Get in touch. We're just talking about, is there still a level of public support? Certainly there has been. Is it still there, particularly in the face of this coordination? That's what I'm asking and pondering tonight. Get in touch. gbviews at gbnews.uk is my email address. Going to take a very quick break. When I come back, is it finally time for peace talks with Russia? I would say yes, and it has been time for a long time. Am I wrong? Where do you stand on it all? I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store? You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, keeping me company till 7 tonight. My panel, the political consultant Alex Dean and the trade unionist and fireman Paul Embry. You guys have been getting in touch. One question that seems to be coming through a lot is this, well, it's a statement, I guess. Many people are saying that they feel that this is all political, all of this striking. Is it, Paul?
No, I mean, I think it's clearly complete rubbish. The idea that these thousands of workers who are voting to take industrial action are doing so because, you know, they're driven by politics or they want to bring the Conservative government down. I mean, it's just nonsense. It doesn't bear any scrutiny. The reason that people are taking strike action to the level that they are at the moment is simply because of the state of the economy and the cost of living crisis and the fact that they're being asked to pay for that economic crisis. That seems to me to be self-evident.
I half agree. I don't think this is like the coal miners who are obviously trying to bring down Heath and then Thatcher. It's not at that level, and it's not...
Hold on. Now, Thatcher destroyed their industry, Alex. Thatcher threw thousands of men on.
Would you like your children to be down a coal mine?
On the scrap heap. Well,
would you like people to be working in coal mines?
Well, I would rather they have a job in a mine than be unemployed, as many of them were, with all of the social problems that came about as a consequence.
Well, then, given that the Labour Party closed more pits than the Conservatives, you'll be very angry.
I'm not going to absolve Labour.
In any case, the point I was making, there was clearly really united union attempt in the past to disrupt and dislodge a Conservative government. And I'm agreeing with Paul that I don't think that's the mass attitude amongst the workers that are talking about striking today. Instead, I think that those seeking to strike are being poorly led by union leaders who, yes, I do think are coordinating in a way deliberately hostile to the government. And the acid test for me and your viewers is, do you think they'd behave the same way if Keir Starmer was in number 10? And broadly speaking, I don't. I think they give Labour a much easier ride.
If you were a cleaner working on the railways at just above the minimum wage, and you were struggling to make ends meet, struggling to feed your kids, struggling to pay the mortgage, and the government was saying, actually, we've got another, 5 years of austerity or whatever it is, you're telling me you would just accept that and say, oh, OK, that's what the government has said,
no,
that's what my employer said.
I would hope that my union would negotiate for me and lead rather better than they have done.
But there comes a
point...
point...
After all, in the end, these aren't individual decisions, right? They're union decisions.
You must recognise...
You don't strike individually.
You must recognise, Alex, and I've been a senior union official in my time, you must recognise there comes a point where there's an impasse. And there's an impasse because the employer is not prepared to meet the demand, or at least negotiate around that demand. Now, at that point, you have a choice, don't you? You either say, OK, I'm going to go back to work and I'm going to take everything they throw at me and I'm going to suffer all of the dire economic consequences of what's going on at the moment, or I'm going to stand up and say, I'm going to fight back. Are there no circumstances in which you would say, do you know what, they've got a point and I'm with them?
I conceded in the very beginning of this that no one has a right to compel you to work and that people have a right to strike. So you're setting up a straw man and then vigorously tearing it down.
No, I'm not. Well, I know you support the right to strike. I'm saying, do you support some of the strikers
happening in principle? Of course,
are there any of the strikers you support at the moment? Of all the strikes that are raging, are there any of them that you support?
No, and not least because in the examples that we are discussing, whether it be in the public sector or the private, offers are on the table, and because of the coordinated union action that you seem to paper over, if not ignore, it's being done deliberately, Paul.
Well, I have to say, there is a mixed opinion coming in on my inbox on this, but I actually think that the balance, this is not a scientific poll, I grant myself that, but I would say actually the balance is with you. I would say that the majority is on your side.
Our viewers and listeners have always been very wise and discerning, haven't they?
Yeah, what can I say? I think, I do give myself a little bit of a thing there because it's not a scientific poll, but I would say that lots of you getting in touch about that. But on the majority, I think it is on the side of Paul and the unions. Keep your thoughts coming in. I want to switch my attention briefly, though, to the situation in Ukraine. I'm asking this, is it now time to move forward with peace talks, negotiations? Russia says it's open to dialogue. Biden has indicated that he might be open to that too. Of course, though, Russia has put some demands in place that might not even happen. But anyway, Alex.
Yeah, Russia said they're willing to talk as long as we recognise their possession of the territories in Ukraine they have unlawfully stolen, annexed, and then conducted sham polls in. No, we shouldn't be entertaining the notion of negotiating with Russia whilst it remains in illegal possession of another sovereign country's territory. And I think that the temptation, of course, is to weaken our stance as time goes, right? The willingness to stand up to something has attrition comes to bear on that willingness, and then you get tired of it, or you get frustrated by it. You just want things to be back to normal, or you want to be able to trade with Russia and K. But actually, no, we shouldn't. And I really lament President Biden's. I mean, he's done so well on this. Whatever else one thinks of him, and I have my own views. I think that the American leadership on this has been tremendous to date. But the pernicious French influence of the state visits obviously come to bear. I think it's very much a shame to see the Americans talking about negotiating with Russia when plainly the Russians only want to do so on a premise none of us should accept. And the Germans are already talking about trying to get back to normal. It's a real shame, and it's one of the things on which we as British people can be very, very proud and say we've done. And the Labour Party stood foursquare on this too. So our Parliament has led us well, and we have supported Ukraine in just the right way. No, we should not be negotiating with Russia.
Paul Embry?
I disagree on Biden's intervention in terms of Alex's position. I mean, I disagree. I think it's an overdue proposal, if anything. And I've been disappointed, actually, that considering the war has been raging now since February, nobody really in any kind of senior position has grasped the nettle and said, look, at some point we're going to try to have to bargain for peace here. Now, if, as it turns out, the demand from Putin that unless you recognise the annexations, we're not going to talk. If that is a showstopper, then of course all bets are off again, and it's back to war.
But it looks like that is the situation.
And but let's not forget, people are often quite bellicose going into talks, and then when the talks begin, they can soften their position somewhat. But it seems to me that somebody at some point has got to say, look, we've got to talk about this, and we've got to try to reach a settlement. That's not in any way to support what Putin has done. I mean, the invasion was horrendous. And
no one would suggest you.
But it strikes me that in many other conflicts internationally, America, are fairly quick to demand ceasefires, quite rightly in many cases, to demand ceasefires, to seek to sue for peace, to tell the two parties to stop fighting each other, to get round the table. You look at, Israel-Palestine, we've done that quite often. But when it's come to this war, it's almost as if that's something that we're not prepared to do.
Paul, no one would suggest you were supporting the Russian position. That was very clear. But underestimating Vladimir Putin's bellicosity is part of what's got us into this problem. Passing his words and saying, well, what he really means when the Soviet Union's collapse was the greatest tragedy of the 20th century is, or what he really means when he says this is part of Greater Russia is. No, he really means what he says. And if you say now, the bellicosity on saying these territories are sovereign and Russian,
so do you think there should be no
that.
compromise at all?
No, I think we should stay with Ukraine until they're out of the last inch of Russia. I turn the question around. How much of Ukraine are you willing to give up?
No, I don't think any of Ukraine should be given up.
We have the same position.
My point is, if there is a window of opportunity for the two sides to come together and to try to negotiate a settlement, which might be based on something like the Minsk Accords, for example, which on the one hand recognises the territorial sovereignty of Ukraine, but understands the need for some degree of self-determination for the ethnic Russians in the east, then if that's a goer, then frankly, frankly, let's go for it. Because the other problem, Alex, we could be in this position 2-3 years down the line, and it becomes a war of attrition, and tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands more people have lost their lives, and it doesn't look like there's going to be a winner. Are you saying that even in those circumstances, we shouldn't seek to bring about a peaceful settlement if there is potentially an opportunity to do so?
Russia is making nothing like the kind of progress militarily that they plainly expected to make when they invaded Ukraine. Yes, in part with significant support from the West, which must, in my view, carry on. But Ukraine itself has done a remarkable job of defending itself against this completely unacceptable war of aggression by Putin. And actually, if anything, Paul, it doesn't look like attrition in the way that you are suggesting. Ukraine right now could win this conflict, and we should do all we can to help them win it on the battlefield.
Well, I mean, I have to say, I think it is a war of attrition. I think, you know, considering it began in February, it doesn't look like any side is about to land a knockout blow, does it?
You say it began in February. Many people will be showing the screens. Actually, all of this was going on way before February.
I agree.
All February was an escalation, an abhorrent escalation, of course, but this has all been going on for many, many years. Yeah. I just want to ask you this on the strike thing. Many people are asking me to ask you this. Shall do so. Back to the strikes. What do you think is an acceptable amount to receive as a pay rise? Just give me a figure that you think.
I don't think you can give an overall figure for every single sector and every single union in every single industry.
Pick one then, fireman. Go on, fire brigade.
Well, OK, so firefighters, for example, have been offered 5%. That comes nowhere near to addressing the cost of living crisis and the current rate of inflation.
So what? Just give me a percent.
Well, I can't speak for every single firefighter. It's up to every single firefighter.
You must have an opinion.
I have an opinion as a firefighter.
Well, give me your opinion then.
And well, I'm not going to pluck a figure out of the air, but if the employers, the fire service employers, put an offer on the table and I thought, actually, in the circumstances, that's reasonable, I would accept it. I'm not going to get put on the hook of a particular figure at the moment. Not that these days I have any influence in the fire brigade union.
Everyone didn't get an answer to that. Just so you know, the average private sector pay rise has been about 6% and a bit. Paul says 5% is not acceptable. Many of these unions, of course, are asking for above inflation pay rises. There you go. Let me know your thoughts on some of that. Let's bring it back, though, shall we, to the UK again. Matt Hancock. He is back in Parliament for the first time since I'm a Celebrity. Should he be? That's what I'm asking you. Tell me, and I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry. I'm keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, the political consultant Alex Dean and the trade unionist and fireman Paul Embry. Some more of your comments coming up in a minute. Gary says, Michelle, every day I write emails to you and every day I'm ignored. Why? Oh, Gary, it's not intentional, my friend. I get so many emails as I'm live on air, so I have to try and listen and talk and think and read and talk at the same time, the emails. So if I do miss you out, it's not intentional. I can promise you that. Matt Hancock, he is back in Parliament after he's been doing all kinds of things in the Australian jungle. Of course, I'm referring to I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. He's, of course, lost his whip. Should he be an MP still, Alex Dean?
In the end, that's up to his constituents. But I have an unfashionable view from not living in his constituency. I have a perspective, and my answer is yes. I think that he has been a good MP for a long time. I thought he was, again, unfashionable view perhaps. I thought he was a good minister who didn't lose his role for performance-related issues. Lost it for other reasons. And I did think when he went to do this TV show that it was a really curious decision. But you know what? Public opinion suggests I was wrong. It seems he's won people around, and so if I take all of those things together, as long as he gets the Tory whip back to sweet, I think he's got a future in Parliament, and I think he's got something to give as well. I think he was a good minister. I think that whilst he's been mocked for its association with this programme, I think his position on stuff like dyslexia is useful and interesting. Yes, I think he's got a political future.
Paul Embry?
I profoundly disagree. I think it should be seen as a huge honour to be sent to Parliament to represent thousands of people in a particular constituency, and it should be a job that you take seriously. It should be a job that you would never dream of thinking I can just swan off for several weeks to the other side of the world and take part in a reality TV show. And if you do that, then that suggests to me you're not taking the job of an MP as seriously as you ought to be.
What about if you do it in your annual leave?
Well, I mean, there's an argument to say if you're doing it in your own private time, then it's a bit different. But obviously that doesn't apply here. And for me, I think he has put his desire for publicity, his desire for money over the interests of his constituents. I think he should have done the decent thing and stood down, and I think there should be a by-election. But clearly he's not going to do that because he doesn't care enough about his constituents to step away.
Did you watch him on the show?
No, I didn't watch a minute of it. I had no intention of watching it. The very fact that he was in there to begin with turned me off a bit.
I was in your camp, I have to say, and then I decided to watch it. I don't really watch those kind of shows, it's not really my kind of thing, but I watched it, obviously, because of the job I do now. And I was really surprised because I had your view when he went in. I thought it was absolutely disgraceful that he was there in the first place, very insulting to all the people that had died through COVID and been affected. And then I saw what was many people would probably call, like, there was bullying and stuff towards him. So then there was a little part of me, I won't say I felt sorry for him, but...
The guy's got grit.
Yeah, and he was... I don't even want to say that.
Let's put it this way. If any of us three were to go to... I mean, his excuse for going in there was... He spoke to Rishi Sunak, I think. He decided that the economy was now stable. Well, that was a joke, wasn't it? And things had stabilised inside the country and the Tory civil war was over. And therefore, with things being stable, it was right to swan off to Australia. Would any of us three be able to go in to see our employer and say, you know, things stable, OK, you don't mind if I take 6 weeks leave because I'm going to New Zealand or something? I mean, what would the response be, especially if you were representing thousands of people who expected you to be going into your workplace and doing a job for them?
So do you have that view about all second jobs, or is it just this kind of concept?
No, I think, I mean, I certainly don't think MPs should be doing, holding directorships and stuff like that. But some jobs possibly, as long as it doesn't impact on their job as an MP. But this clearly did.
Well, there you go. Let me know your thoughts. Do you think Matt Hancock should be in Parliament or not? Do you even care about him anymore? Or as life moved on, you tell me. Simon says the man is an oxygen thief. I don't know any other employer that would allow you to be in your job and doing this. Tracy said, leave him alone. Yes, he should be allowed to go back to his job for the simple rest. Everyone else has. Ian says, no MP should be allowed to go on holiday when Parliament is sitting, and you certainly shouldn't be getting paid when you're not working. There you go. Look at the time. That is all I've got time for tonight. Thank you very much for your company. Lots of love for you two. Enjoying the debate tonight. Many people at home have been. Thank you, Paul, Alex. Thank you for your company, for your engagement. Sorry if I didn't get a chance to read out your email. Have a wonderful weekend, but do not go anywhere because Lawrence Fox is up next.
Evening, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. A chilly one this weekend thanks to easterly winds. Most of us will be dry for much of the weekend, but there will be a few showers around. High pressure is a long way away, but it is controlling our weather. Out in the Atlantic, there's a couple of areas of low pressure, but it's really that high which is generating this easterly breeze, bringing the air in from the North Sea. Never a warm direction. It means that eastern areas will be most likely to see the showers, a few of them continuing through the evening. Elsewhere, many places will be dry. Quite a lot of clouds, some mist and fog that's been thickening up again across parts of Wales and southwest England during this evening. Where we keep the clearer skies, well, some pockets of frost possible, particularly northwest England and southern Scotland, but most of us will start the weekend about 3 or 4 degrees. Should be a brighter day tomorrow compared to today, but there'll still be a lot of cloud, especially in the east, and we'll still have some of these showers coming in from the North Sea. A bit more in the way of cloud and drizzly rain over the Highlands and the Western Isles. Mostly cloudy across parts of Northern Ireland. Some sunny spells for southwest Scotland, West Wales. Temperatures 6, 7, maybe 8 Celsius, but with that breeze, it's going to feel colder than that, and it's going to get colder still as we head into Sunday. Again, not too much frost overnight though, because there'll be a lot of cloud around. Where we keep some clearer skies, temperatures could dip down to freezing, but say generally we'll keep temperatures above freezing because there will be a lot of cloud into Sunday, but there will also be a lot of showers on Sunday, particularly over northern England, southern Scotland and southern parts of Northern Ireland. A few showers likely in the south, but many places here just dry but fairly drab. That easterly wind will probably be strengthening through the weekend, so that's going to make it feel particularly cold on Sunday. Temperatures 5, 6, 7 degrees at best. Feeling though a lot colder with that wind. May get colder still next week.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers.